Am I building muscle strength or tendon strength in my knees right now? Knowing the difference is one of the keys to longevity. My name's Jeremy and I am an ATG certified level 1 coach. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to build muscle and tendon strength, particularly in the knees. This is going to be part 1 of a series where I'm going to be going over how to build muscle and tendon strength of all the major joints of the body so that they can function well in your sport and into old age. I'm going to start this by going over just some basic anatomy, and then we'll go over some biomechanics. And then from there, I'll show you how you can manipulate those mechanics to put either proportionately more stress on a muscle or the connective tissue, i.e. tendons and ligaments. Let's get started. As part of the musculoskeletal system, we have muscles, tendons, and ligaments. When muscles contract, they pull on the tendons, which then move our joints, because the tendons connect the muscle to the bone. Ligaments connect bone to bone. Now, when I contract my muscles in a squat, the weight of my body is resisting it. It wants to bring me back down. But as resistance is increased over time, your body's ability to contract gets stronger. But depending on the angle of the joint, when you're undergoing that contraction, can put either more stress on the muscle or the connective tissue, i.e. tendons and ligaments. But understanding which exercises target which part of the musculoskeletal system requires some knowledge of how strength curves work. Let me show you some examples. Let's look at some squat variations. In a back squat, the hardest part of the exercise is right around where the thighs hit parallel. The quads and the glutes are under a decent stretch, but not to their full extent, not fully stretched. As a result, we might call this a mid-range exercise because, again, the hardest part of the exercise is when the joints are about midway between their shortest range and their most stretched range. So again, we might call this a mid-range exercise. In a mid-range strength curve, you can expect to get some muscular and connective tissue development. Okay, so that will be, again, what we might call a mid-range exercise. But let's see how this compares to a VMO squat, okay? You'll see how it's a little bit different. So in a VMO squat, okay, my torso is more upright, and you'll notice the knees come a lot further over the toes. As a general rule, the further the knees go over the toes, the more connective tissue development we are going to get. You're still working the muscle, but proportionately, you're going to put more stress on the connective tissue. So again, more knees over toes, more connective tissue development. Less knees over toes, as in like say a box squat, less connective tissue development, more muscular development. That's why in more shallow squats, you can usually lift more weight. Now, I'm not saying those are bad, but remember, for longevity, we do want both. We want to make sure that we have strong muscles and tendons. If we have too much disproportionate development, we could end up with some chronic knee pain here. But what if this is too hard though? What if getting into these deep squats just hurts too much and you're not sure where to start? Okay, so a great place to start could be simply walking backwards. So remember what I said, knee over toe. The more the knee is over the toe, the more connective tissue development. Just so happens when you walk backwards, you're bringing that knee over the toe, but in a very gentle and safe way. There's virtually no eccentric force. So this is a great place to start. Say 3 days a week, 10 to 15 minutes at a time. And that could be a great way to start just getting some circulation to the area in a gentle way to start rebuilding that connective tissue along with the muscles. Now, if you have access to a sled, you can take that even a step further, although walking backwards by itself is definitely a great solution on its own. But if you do have access to a sled, then you can add weight to that sled, effectively adding resistance, making it harder to walk backwards for nearly endless progression. You can add more weight, go faster, do time trials, and pick your favorite variable, to change. And again, you have room for nearly endless progression here. So those two exercises alone can be game changers for somebody who is getting started on their journey to rebuilding strong connective tissue in their knees. As your knee begins to heal, you're gonna wanna add in eccentric load again. A great way to do this is through reverse step-ups. The higher the step, the further your knee will go over that toe, putting direct pressure on the knee and all its components to strengthen, particularly that VMO muscle and the patellar tendon here, according to Zelmer et al. In 2017. So as long as you go at your pain-free level, you can progress this movement to gradually improve the strength and your pain-free ability in your VMO muscle and patellar tendon. Okay, so now that we're starting to add in that eccentric load in the knees over toes position in that step up, we are gonna want to ease our way into full knee flexion. Again, we can accomplish that through split squats, which can be regressed by elevating the front leg and using assistance until we're able to get to flat ground. From here, we can add weight in our hands or a barbell on our back or in front of us, and even elevate the back leg for further stretch strength benefits. But it is this full knee flexion position that tells the body to keep sending synovial fluid to the joint. And really, it's what helps keep it from breaking down prematurely. But if we never get into these full knee flexion positions, then we don't get as much synovial fluid sent to the joint, and it can break down a little quicker. So this full knee flexion position is important for the long term. We do want to maintain and even strengthen that ability. A note about split squats here. The strength curve is a little bit different in a split squat as opposed to a back squat, right? Or a VMO squat, which is more up and down. However, in a split squat, you'll notice it's a little more down and forward, as in an escalator. As a result, what parts of the musculature and connective tissue are stressed are a little bit different. So in a split squat, there's actually 3 different strength curves happening simultaneously. So I'm gonna go through all 3 of them. Let's start on the front leg. So with the front leg, again, we're going down but forward also, so like an escalator. Now, in this version, in the split squat, the hardest position is this very bottom piece here. So the musculature is most stressed when I am most stretched at the knee joint. So for the front leg, we might call this a long range exercise because again, the musculature is most stressed when it is in the most stretched position. So that would be a long range movement. However, something different is happening with the back leg. Notice with the back leg, I have to fight to keep this knee fully extended. It wants to fall on the ground, but the more it extends, the more short this muscle gets, the harder it gets. So with the back leg, you're actually getting what we might call a short range strength curve. Not necessarily because literally the range at which the joint moves is very small, although that's true in this movement, but it's more to communicate the fact that in this, again, the back leg, it's harder the more it extends, the straighter the knee gets. And with the front leg, the more it flexes, the harder it gets. So with the front leg, it's more of a long range exercise. Back leg or back knee, more of a short range movement. Thirdly, let's talk about the hip. The hip would also be undergoing more of a long range exercise strength curve, because the more it stretches, the harder it gets, but as I ascend back up and it shortens, the easier it gets. VMO squats are another exercise that you can use to get yourself into deep knee flexion. And you can scale it by using assistance to no assistance, to a dumbbell or barbell in front, to a barbell on your back, or even a barbell behind your back. As a matter of fact, this was actually one of George Hackenschmidt's favorite exercises, and he was reported to be jumping over chairs in his late 80s. Now, all of the exercises and the variations that I've showed you, I believe are enough to help you build strong and healthy knees for your entire life. I don't think you really need anything else. But if you want some more options and you don't have some of the equipment that I showed you, or you're like me and you just love calisthenics and being able to know how to challenge your body without necessarily just adding weights, well, then the next two variations I want to show you are for you. Just make sure that you always go with your pain-free level and that you build a strong foundation with some of the exercises, other ones that I've showed you here. So, next one I want to show you is a sissy squat. Now, first let's look at a split squat. In a split squat, your front hip is flexed, back hip is extended. In a VMO squat, both hips are flexed. In a sissy squat, the hips are not flexed at all. This puts even more stretch on the connective tissue and the quads. Now, to be fair, it's not really a squat. It's more like a body weight leg extension there, okay? But we might call this, for our strength curve, we might call it an end range exercise. So if you're ready for it, you are really gonna stress the connective tissue in your knees for that, but you can build very strong knees as a result. Just make sure you're ready for it. Again, always follow your pain-free level. But the reason why we might call it an end range exercise is because it gets hardest when you are in nearly a maximally stretched position there. That's why we might call it an end range exercise. Now, this scales too. Maybe you're not ready to go all the way to the floor. So if that is the case, what you can do then is put something under your knees to restrict the range of motion. And you could do something like this. And then over time, you gradually take it away until you're on the ground. The next one I'm going to show you are reverse Nordics. Now, this might be the most extreme exercise that I'm going to show you today. I might call this an end range exercise, very similar to the sissy squats, because the hardest part of the exercise is when you are in a particularly deep stretch. So it is going to put a lot of stress on the knee joint, right? Your knees are going to be pretty far over your toes. You're in a maximum stretch, but as long as you follow some common sense and you only go at your pain-free level when you are ready, then you have nothing to fear. As a matter of fact, research concluded by Fernandez et al. In 2018 that the adaptations from the reverse Nordic have implications for injury prevention and rehabilitation programs. So even though it's a bit extreme, it shouldn't be feared. So in a reverse Nordic, again, your hips are in a pretty fixed position here, and they're really not going anywhere. So there's really only one angle, one joint moving here. So you're going to contract the glutes. You might want to put something on your ankles to stay comfortable, but you're going to contract the glutes, try and keep your hips as neutral as possible, and then you're just going down as deep as you can and coming back up. So this is gonna build tremendous strength in your knees and particularly in the connective tissue there. So again, not necessary, but if you don't have equipment, it can be a great option for you. Now, let's quickly go over the back of the knee. We've spent this whole video so far talking about the knee extensors, right? Your quads and everything. But now let's talk just a little bit about the knee flexors and how some different strength curves can work for that. So if you have something like this, a monkey foot, you can strap a dumbbell to your foot. If you do something like this, right, the exercise gets hardest right around this mid position here, and then gets a little bit easier towards that top. But the hardest position is that mid range. So kind of like with our back squats, we might call this a mid-range strength curve. Again, the hardest point is when your lower leg is in that parallel position. It's furthest from its rotational axis, which is the knee. So again, we might call that a mid-range exercise. Not a whole lot of tension in this bottom position when your knee is fully extended, but it gets harder near the top. But in a Nordic, you might call this a long-range exercise because the exercise gets harder as you get more and more into a stretched position. You lengthen at those knees, okay? So again, using the monkey foot, this position is where the exercise gets hardest as your knee is getting flexed and you're bringing your heel closer and closer to your bum. But in a Nordic, again, there's like no tension in this position and it gets harder as we lengthen the hamstrings. So we might call this a long range exercise for the hamstrings behind the knee. So an exercise like this, long range, you're gonna maximize your development of the connective tissue along with the musculature. Whereas using the monkey feet, also a great exercise, and you're gonna get a pretty decent balance between connective tissue and muscular development. But if you wanna maximize that connective tissue development, then you'll wanna start building into long range exercises like this that really stress that stretched position of the knees. So if you want to scale this exercise, it can scale too. You start with it elevated and you bring it lower until you're flat on the ground. And for the real freaks, you can even elevate the back. Okay, so I know I talked about a lot of things in this video, so let's wrap it up and come to a conclusion here. So if you want longevity, you want to have healthy knees for a lifetime, then we want to build strength in those short and long range positions. We want to strengthen the muscles and the tendons. For the front of the knees, generally speaking, that means we want to get stronger in our knees over toes positions. We want to get into positions that allow our knees to get further and further over our toes, pain-free. So a great way to start is through backwards walking, 3 days a week, 15 minutes at a time. Great place to start. If you have access to a sled, you can use that and start adding weight. After that, we want to start adding an eccentric load with things like reverse step-ups. And of course, you can adjust the intensity by adding height and weight. But eventually, for those long-term results, we do want to get into full knee flexion with things like split squats, VMO squats, sissy squats, reverse Nordics, or exercises of that nature, which really get your knees into that full knee flexion position. And then for behind the knees, we said that we also want to get strong, not only in the hamstring muscles themselves, but the very connective tissue with things like the Nordic hamstring curl, which is going to do just that. It's going to stress the connective tissue because it's more of a long range exercise, meaning that it's hardest when your hamstrings are most stretched. So that's our application there. Now, if you want to get some online form coaching for these exercises that I showed you to start your journey on beginning to build some pain-free ability in your knees for a lifetime, then I would highly encourage you to check out the ATG online coaching app. If you use the code that I have in the description box below, you can get a discount off of your first month. If you are interested in getting some in-person coaching, I'm currently in the Philadelphia area and you can reach out to me at jhaystrength.com. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this was helpful to you, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching this video. For more information, for training and pricing options, check out jhaystrength.com.